During World War II, Korea had been occupied by Japan, and like many other areas at the end of World War II, it divided into areas of influence by the Americans and the Russians, with the 38th parallel being the dividing line between the two areas. However, neither the Americans nor the Russians were going to continually occupy the areas. Instead, they attempted to set up governments favourable to their side, a communist one in the north of Korea, a democratic one in the south. The election in the south was supervised by the newly formed United Nations, with Syngman Rhee elected as president in the south, and a few months later Kim Il-sung led the north. However, each of these governments considered themselves to be the true government of the whole of Korea, and so it sowed the seed of the conflict to come. In 1948, the Soviets withdrew their troops from the north, followed a year later by the Americans withdrawing from the south. At the same time as the American withdrawal, however, the Chinese Civil War came to a conclusion, with the Communists victorious. During the war, the Chinese Communists had received substantial help from North Korea. This is important because the vast majority of the northern border of North Korea was with China, with the Russian border only being a very narrow strip along the coast, about 12 miles long, and the Chinese would not forget the assistance they had received. Even before the Americans left South Korea, there was already a communist guerrilla campaign against the government. This is due to the South Korean government excluding all communists and their sympathisers from any role in the political process. However, the guerrilla campaign was going very badly, and quite quickly, most of the guerrillas had either been killed or captured. To understand what happened next, we must take a look at the situation and how it looked from the viewpoint of North Korea. Now, thanks in part to the captured German scientists, Russia had an advanced rocket program that successfully tested a nuclear weapon, so America no longer had the monopoly on nuclear weapons. The British had withdrawn from India, the French were locked into a guerrilla campaign in Vietnam and couldn't spare any resources for another conflict. The Japanese had a new constitution that prevented them from fighting overseas. Just left the Americans, who were now pulling out of South Korea, and the public opinion back home in the States was fervently anti-communist, also felt they'd been dragged into two world wars, and the public didn't want to be involved in another one. In opposition to these countries, North Korea had the backing of the powerful Russian and Chinese governments, which regarded it very favourable to it, and unlike the other world powers, lay just across its northern border. In the southern part of Korea, the North felt it would have broad support from the rural population, as well as the guerrillas that it thought were waging a successful campaign against the southern Korean government. With this backdrop, it's not surprising that in the summer of 1950, North Korea invaded the south in an attempt to reunite the whole country under the leadership of Kim Il-sung. With North Korean veteran units which had gained valuable experience in the Chinese Civil War, now re-equipped with the latest Russian equipment including tanks and aircraft, when they crossed the border they easily pushed aside the South Korean units that had virtually no tanks and no aircraft. What was left of the South Korean army was outnumbered and outgunned, retreated to Busan, the southeasternmost corner of Korea. However, all was not lost for South Korea, since the United Nations, which supervised the elections in the south, generally regarded the invasion as a gross violation of their sovereign territory. A vote was called for in the Security Council. In the United Nations, China was still being represented by the nationalist government rather than the communist government. Because of this, Russia had boycotted the United Nations some 5 months earlier. This meant Russia, who actually had a veto in the Security Council and could have blocked any resolution over North Korea, didn't actually take part in the vote. As a result, a unanimous pair of votes, firstly condemning the invasion, and the second one recommending all states provide military assistance to South Korea to repel the invasion. For the time being, however, only one nation was actually in a real position to do anything. That was America, due to their strong naval and army forces posted in Japan at the time. However, even the American forces were in trouble. Budget cuts had drastically reduced the power of both the Navy and the Air Force. A proposed blockade of North Korea was impossible. Congress, however, did vote for $12 billion to be used in the Korean conflict. But this would take time, and did Korea have that time?